Hello students, this is Module 5.3.1, Microbes 1. Microbes are a group of organisms that are grouped together by virtue of their size. That is, by being microscopic, we examine microbes together. In addition, most microbes carry on life in a single cell. Microbes are unicellular. They're not simple. Most are more efficient than you. Microbes are also ubiquitous. And that's spelled wrong. So correct the spelling of ubiquitous. And this means that they're found almost everywhere. They have great importance in an ecological sense. Some are able to photosynthesize. Some can fix nitrogen. Fixing carbon, by the way, is the same as photosynthesizing. Some can fix nitrogen, which is to say that they can make their own fertilizer from air, or they can make fertilizer for plants from air. Many of the nitrogen-fixing bacteria live on the roots of members of the legume family, the pea family. So the photosynthesizers are at the base of the food chain. Certainly a very important role that they play is as decomposers. They certainly have medical importance. Some of them are parasitic pathogens in people that cause diseases. They also have great economic importance. They can help produce food, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, and also other products. Bacteria can be food. If we took some yogurt in here and made a wet mount of it, looked at it under a microscope, we'd see that it's almost entirely made of bacteria. Certainly, by causing diseases in our agricultural plants and animals, they also are of economic importance. They spoil billions of dollars worth of food each year in the world, and they have great scientific importance. Recall that much of what we know about genetics was first learned in E. coli, and later we looked at eukaryotes to understand this. Also, E. coli and other bacteria can serve as vectors for biotechnology and serve as a cloning mechanism for genes of interest. Let's look at the groups of organisms that we collectively call microbes. These are 5 different groups of organisms. The first 2 are made of prokaryotic cells. Kingdom Archaebacteria containing the archaea, kingdom bacteria, both prokaryotic. Viruses and the forms that are close to them are not cellular and therefore are not considered alive. Kingdom Protista and kingdom fungi are both eukaryotic. Most protists are fairly small, but some are macroscopic. Think of the big algae, but the big ones obviously don't fall into the category of microbes. And then kingdom fungi, the vast majority are macroscopic, but some, think of yeast, are microbes. So first we're going to look at bacteria. We'll look at the characteristics of bacteria kind of together, and then we'll look at the 2 groups. So this is very small, this writing here, but if we just zip through it, bacteria are made of prokaryotic cells, and all the rest of this just explains what goes with being prokaryotic, not having a nucleus, not having organelles, having cell walls, having ribosomes. There are different forms, but all of the bacteria are unicellular. They may aggregate together in colonies or in filaments. Some of the algae-like bacteria are in filaments. And many bacteria have flagella and therefore are motile, which is the same as mobile. They can move. Bacteria have virtually every type of nutrition, with the exception of they are not ingestive heterotrophs. They are absorptive heterotrophs, and the difference being that ingestive heterotrophs do some kind of engulfment of other organisms, kind of like we eat. We are ingestive heterotrophs. But some bacteria are photoautotrophs. They photosynthesize. Bacteria are the only living forms that can use chemosynthesis and therefore are considered chemoautotrophs. And so we can see some of these different types of nutrition. Reproduction is typically by binary fission, a cell dividing into two. And they can divide very rapidly. And this is one lesson you should take from Biology 101 out into your real life. When your Aunt Bessie puts the potato salad at the family reunion in the sun, you should recognize that bacteria can divide very quickly, and that there are certainly, because bacteria are ubiquitous, that there are some inside the potato salad. So you better take it and put it in the ice chest, or at the very least out of the sun. Bacteria are also capable of something called conjugation, where two bacteria will come alongside each other and they'll have a tube that connects them called a conjugation tube. They exchange parts of their DNA, not an exact 50-50 exchange as happens in sex, but conjugation is a form of genetic recombination, which is really what sex is all about. There are about 5,000 described species of bacteria. The real number is really not known. We think it may be a minimum of 100,000 species. There are 500 different species that occur in the human gut, so quite diverse right there. Of course, the roles that bacteria play, they can be decomposers, helping with global geochemical cycles. They can be symbionts, that is, partners, mutualists, found on the roots of plants, especially those legumes, members of the pea family. Remember that a member of the legume family has a fruit, which is a pod. Think of a pea pod. Mesquite trees are in this family. Their seeds are attached inside the pod, but nevertheless. Other bacteria found in the guts of animals. Think of E. coli. Others still are pathogens. We're going to talk about bacterial pathogens. Recall that bacteria are very small. I think when we were studying cells, we told you that on average prokaryotic cells are 1/10 the size of eukaryotic cells. Bacteria can form endospores. I used to have an article up on the bulletin board in the classroom that was talking about the recovery of endospores from ice cores from Antarctica that were as old as 200,000 to 300,000 years. And of course, the scientists were going to try to grow these endospores. Very interesting stuff. Sounds like a science fiction movie of some sort, I suppose. But endospores can allow bacteria to survive rough times. Okay, now that we kind of have some general characteristics of bacteria, let's look at archaebacteria. These are called archaebacteria, which means ancient bacteria. But what it says up here about being the most primitive prokaryotes is simply not true. So scratch that out in your mind. The archaebacteria are more closely related to the eukaryotes than the other bacteria are. Notice that the archaebacteria do not have peptidoglycan in their cell walls. Recall that's a carbohydrate with peptide cross bonds, kind of like protein cross bonds. Three major groups of archaea that we're going to talk about. Methanogens actually are able to produce methane. Methane is a chemical CH4. If you know, methane is actually found in flatulence. It's fart gas, but it's also swamp gas. And usually when we're talking about archaea, it's swamp gas. And so in this case, these bacteria can break down organic matter and release methane, which is capable of spontaneously combusting. It can form little bursts of fire. And if this happens out in a swamp, it may be something that is called the will-o'-the-wisp. Will-o'-the-wisp was this mythological figure, supposedly, that would lead travelers astray and get them lost out in the swamps or the forests. They saw what they thought was the light of someone's lantern, and they would go deeper and deeper in the forest. And, of course, it was simply the archaea, the methanogens, releasing methane, which spontaneously combusted. A second major group of archaea are the halophiles. These are salt-loving bacteria. They occur in very very concentrated salty environments. Think of the Dead Sea or the Great Salt Lake. Also in evaporation ponds where they're making salt. These bacteria can really survive there. The thermophiles are the heat-loving bacteria. They can live in places like Morning Glory Pool in Yellowstone National Park where it's very hot. That's where Thermus aquaticus, the bacterium that Kary Mullis thought of using its DNA polymerase to accomplish PCR, the polymerase chain reaction. This little picture over here shows a black smoker, a hydrothermal vent where hot water is spewing out, and of course some of the archaea live there. But if we go out here and look in the soil just outside here, there is likely to be some archaea there in these regular environments. We used to think they were only in extreme environments, but we know now that that's not true. Let's look at the other group of bacteria, the true bacteria. And most prokaryotes belong to this group. Unlike the archaea, the bacteria have peptidoglycan in their cell wall. The vast majority are harmless or helpful, even beneficial, but some few are pathogens and cause diseases. There are many lineages. We're certainly not going to talk about them. I want to remind you of something that we discussed under the germ theory, and that is the idea of self-inoculation. And this is, of course, when you touch the environment with your hands. Remember that the bacteria are ubiquitous, but then you touch your mucous membranes, your eyes or your nostrils, or you eat food, and thereby you bypass your skin, allowing bacteria past your first defense. And of course, one of the major advances was the understanding of microbes and the requirement for sterile techniques, including soap and hand washing. So big deal. This picture in the upper right is bacteria on a human tongue. All I can say is very, very nice. Down here in the lower right corner, we have some cyanobacteria. These are photosynthetic forms, also called the blue-green algae. Some of the diseases caused by bacteria include anthrax. This affects ungulates, which are large, hooved, herbivorous mammals. Think of deer and cows and things like that. And typically where you'd find anthrax spores is where an animal infected with the disease had died. And there, where among their bones, there would be endospores of anthrax. And so you had to be unlucky to encounter such a place, or you had to encounter an animal that had it. Another place where you can get anthrax is from hides or skins of animals that may have had it. There was a national park employee who was doing a necropsy on the dead body of a mountain lion, and the mountain lion had contracted anthrax from some of its deer prey, and the park employee didn't know it, and he ended up also getting anthrax, and he died from it. Of course, the reason you've heard of anthrax is because it's weaponized. We've used biotechnology to make the spores easier to fly, more aerodynamic, so to speak. It's quite difficult, however, to grow concentrated spores and to harvest them. So that's fairly sophisticated microbiology techniques. Anyway, a second bacterial disease is cholera. This is a diarrheal disease, very serious. And mostly it's spread through unsanitary water. And so over 1 billion people, or well, not approaching 1 billion people on this planet don't have clean water to drink. And if they contract cholera, 50 to 60% mortality. And most of these are children, often under the age of 5. So it's really quite a tragic disease. Bubonic plague is a disease also called the Black Plague. This is one from Monty Python, Bring Out Your Dead. That might sound funny now, but at the time it was a terror. You didn't know where you could go and not avoid it. They didn't understand the mechanism of disease. We know now that plague is vectored by fleas. We know that the bacterium that causes bubonic plague kind of likes cooler temperatures, so it occurs at higher elevations. For example, campgrounds up in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, there's usually 1 or 2 of them that close every couple of years because of plague carrying squirrels being found there. They have fleas that have the plague. Up in Flagstaff, almost every year someone contracts bubonic plague. Usually it's a hunter that shoots like a prairie dog or something like that, and the fleas will jump off of that mammal and onto the hunter and bite him and give him the bacterium. Number 4 there is tuberculosis, or TB. In older literature, you might see it referred to as consumption. This was a very deadly disease, and the thing is, it's coming back, and that's why we've written silent epidemic there, that there are strains of tuberculosis that really cannot be effectively treated with any of the antibiotics that we have. So that should be a very frightening specter. Number 5 is typhus. This is another bacterial disease. This bacterium is vectored by lice, and it's not quite as famous as bubonic plague, but it also had some major impact on history. Number 6 is botulism. And this is a bacterium which really grows mostly from improperly canned foods, but most people know of the botulinum toxin because of Botox, and it is a very strong neurotoxin that is used to relax nerves in the face, thereby reducing wrinkles. You got to be crazy to be injecting this stuff in your face, but people do it. Number 7, food poisoning is caused by a variety of bacteria. I'll just mention 2. E. coli is often found in animals that we slaughter for their meat, and it's occupying the digestive tract, the colon, and it gets on the meat and, of course, can cause problems. We get trouble if E. coli, we can have coliform bacteria, which E. coli belongs to that general category. If manure or something gets on other food, then it can also contaminate it, like lettuce or other things. But it's mostly when we don't cook a hamburger well enough and the bacterium is in the center of it. You should cook your hamburger to 160 degrees Fahrenheit to be safe. A second bacterium that causes food poisoning is Salmonella. Number 8, Lyme disease. This is a bacterial disease that's vectored by deer ticks. These are the small little ticks that are about as big as the lead of a regular pencil, a number 2 pencil or something like that. It's named after Lyme, Connecticut, where they first made the connection between these ticks and this spirochete bacterium. One of the major symptoms is an odd fatigue, and it can be a very difficult disease to diagnose. When you're first bit by the tick, it will make sometimes a target-shaped rash right around the tick bite. So that might be something that you could look forward to try to self-diagnose if you think you might be exposed. These ticks and this bacterium is in Arizona at the present time. Number 9 is tetanus. Tetanus is a very common bacterium. It's all around, but it's only dangerous if it gets put into our body in a deep puncture wound. And little superficial wounds, we can wash them out and use some kind of antibiotic ointment and no problem. But if you get a deep puncture wound like stepping on a nail, then the spores can get in there. It can be very, very serious. Tetanus actually means a real tightening of the muscles, and in this case, if the masseter muscles, the jaw muscles, they can be so tight that the victim can't open their mouth, and so hence the nickname lockjaw. Number 10 is a bacterium called chlamydia. Chlamydia is an STD, stands for sexually transmitted disease. The symptoms are somewhat like a urinary tract infection, that's UTI, but chlamydia can cause sterility, and this should be a matter of great concern to anyone who's sexually active. Men can be asymptomatic and have this disease, but women typically will develop symptoms, and women are more in danger of becoming sterile than are men. Here are some pictures of bacterial diseases or bacteria that cause some of the diseases. There are some beautiful photographs here, but these can be really, really tough. How do we treat bacterial diseases? By using antibiotics. And the big problem here is the evolution of resistance to antibiotics by bacteria. So we have strains of bacteria that can't be killed by any antibiotics that we possess. Think of MRSA. MRSA stands for methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. And in this, you're supposed you can get infected with these things. It can start with a little ulcer somewhere, like a little infection on your finger or something. Pretty soon it's eating your whole hand. The medical treatment, because of antibiotics don't work, might be to cut off parts of your body in an attempt to stay ahead of this. But if you get a systemic infection, it can kill you, and we cannot stop it. One thing that you can help to do is to reduce the improper use of antibiotics. So when you're prescribed antibiotics, you shouldn't stop taking them just simply because you're feeling better. You might thereby help the breeding of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Another thing you can do is recognize that there are some diseases like the flu, which are viral, and viruses aren't helped by antibiotics. Antibiotics only kill bacteria. They don't kill viruses. And so there's nothing you can do when you have a common cold or the flu. Taking antibiotics won't help these diseases. We're going to conclude this module.